Hi, and welcome to Chris 180's Candid Conversation series. I'm Chandra Luckett, your host and the Chief Marketing Officer here. 40 million people. That's how many people over the age of 12 struggle with substance use. And with September being National Recovery Month, we wanted to bring forth a conversation about addiction and the path to healing. It often leaves a trail of destruction behind, not just for the person, but for their family members as well. But there is hope in small steps made by not only the individual dealing with the substance use, but also the loved ones in their lives who just want to see them healed. Today, we'll have a conversation with our experts in these fields to talk a little bit more about what we can do to reduce the stigma around addiction and how we can all move forward as a greater community. We have with us today Project Director Kathy Brown-Bragg and Chris 180 Clinical Director Bryan Smith. Take it away.
My name is Kathy Brown-Bragg, and I am the Project Director here at Chris 180 for our New Generation Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Services. I have gotten into substance abuse and substance education for many years, working with women and children who have been impacted by either their use of substances, family members, and how it has impacted their children. So I bring many years of experience, and I look forward to really supporting those families and young children at Chris and being able to share information that I have around substance abuse and the family system.
My name is Bryan Smith. I'm the clinical director here at Chris 180 in Atlanta. I've been a substance abuse counselor for about 12 years now. I've worked in different with different populations, detox, residential programs, as well as intensive outpatient. Bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in the field, and I kind of just wake up every day and strive to help people get better themselves. No matter where they're at in their recovery process.
We can really start with dealing with the realities of addiction and how it looks different, or if it looks different in the world today. So, what are your thoughts, Bryan?
Well, Kathy, I think like everything in the world, it's always changing. Addiction, like many diseases, kind of you see it on the spectrum. From young adults, adolescents, all the way even with children. I think one of the biggest things today is the accessibility to technology, to the amount of stimuli that we see, whether it's in movies, music, entertainment. It's something that I believe is also driving addiction as well. So a lot of times it's glorified. You see that, hear that in music and videos and stuff like that. And I think at its core, it's entertainment, and it's something that we thrive off and we love. But when you speak to addiction and kind of the lens that people who struggle with addiction see it through, it can also be problematic.
Absolutely. And I think also the fact that you mentioned, as far as technology is concerned, I think it has a lot of impact, because with addiction or substance use, people have glamorized it on some level and normalized it. And so it's really important for just the average person to understand that addiction is real. It is a disease, and I like the idea that you pointed that out, that it is a disease. And I think that because it is a disease, I think our perspectives on treatment and recovery have all kind of really evolved. And so it is something that we all are faced with, but I think the reality of it is that it's here, that we really have to understand that it's not going anywhere, but that we can be very proactive in terms of educating young children, families, young adults, all about the harm of what addiction looks like. So from, when you think about like the pandemic, people were at home, they were having cocktail parties and wines and all these fun things. And I think that on many levels, we've, as I said, normalized it to it's expected, it's required in order to have fun. And I think that we have to change the narrative in terms of recognizing that there is a thin line between healthy enjoyment, social drinking, and then we move into unhealthy and addiction, and how that impacts families and the communities that we live in.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think with the pandemic, I remember when it first started, everything was closing down. And one of the things that were opening, at least in my neighborhood, was the liquor store. There were lines literally around the corner for the liquor store. And it kind of just, brought that awareness that how important and how entrenched we are with alcohol. Even it's football season now. So on Sunday when you watch, when you're watching the games, the commercial breaks in between, most of that is predicated off addictive behaviors. So you'll see Budweiser commercials followed by Coors Light, followed by DraftKings. And these are all things that, can become addictive. So I think, to your point, it's very important to understand like where that line of that line is drawn, where it's just having fun or kind of experiencing alcohol, and it becomes problematic and, leads to addiction.
And I think also, even in terms of drugs, I think we moved from, drugs being something that's very taboo to almost very recreational. That in order to have fun, you have to have certain type of drugs. Those substances equate to fun. And so, again, looking at how we as a culture look at what we need to have fun and what is really fun and what has become very dangerous, because those messages are really significant.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper on this. So Kathy, you mentioned in terms of casual drinking and those casual things. How do you know when it's crossed the line and maybe you all are going too far?
I think when it impacts your family, when it impacts your ability to work, when it impacts any of your relationships, and I think that's the important piece that, we do have people who they would say, well, I can drink and then I can go to work and I'm fine. And that may be the case for a minimum amount of time, but eventually the substance, whether it's alcohol or any kind of illicit drugs or prescription drugs, will definitely impact your overall support systems, whether it's your family, your children, your job, just your overall health, and your ability to just be the best that you could be is impacted. So that's the line, when you find yourself really needing it, when you find yourself not being as effective and productive in your everyday experiences, and when you start breaking down your relationships, that's when you know, okay, I'm at that point. I have crossed over from, as I said, that occasional drink, or we're, having a party, or I only drink on the weekends, so maybe drinking every day, or, binge drinking, excessive amounts of alcohol at any particular time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, just the biological makeup of us, the more you consume anything, whether it's drugs or alcohol, your tolerance is going to grow. So as that tolerance grows, you need more of the substance, to feel the same effect. And I think a lot of times people become addicted to substances without them even knowing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the other piece to it is just really accepting it. So, in 12-step program, we talk about step one, being powerless over your over addiction. And it's a really hard concept or a really hard thing for people to kind of grasp, that you're powerless over something. But yes, when you are drinking or using drugs to function on a daily basis, and everything that you do for fun is associated with drugs and alcohol, it's definitely time to kind of take a look at that and see, is it helping you?
Yeah. And I think also it's very difficult to have that self-awareness, and that's where I think your family and your loved ones have to come into play, because when you see someone that's going down this slippery slope and you really want to catch them, but you don't really have the ability, the skills in order to say and do the things. And that's where I think, family members have to reach out to others, either others who have been in recovery and understand what that looks like and what a person will need, as well as looking to the community, individuals, whether we look at the clubhouses for adolescent program for youth, or we're looking at our intensive outpatient services at the Tree, or we're looking at groups that we have at some of the health centers that we have.
Yeah. And I think, medically assisted treatment in conjunction with counseling, offers people who are struggling with addiction a pretty good chance.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really predicated on on just daily vigilance, things that you can learn even outside of Chris 180, or any, professional setting. Every community across the country has AA and NA, which are strong support groups, and, they really encourage people to change their lifestyle, to live a certain way, to get sponsorship, and to understand that it's going to take a community effort. It's something that's really hard to overcome as an individual, because the addiction, the person who's addicted wants to isolate, and that's the power of the addiction. It's speaking to you, and it wants to separate you from your friends, from your family, from your support network, and people, who can offer that help. And that's one of the major things I think that, people really want to focus on if they want to kind of live a clean and healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think even wanting that is very difficult when you have the stigma of addiction.
Yeah.
We have, an idea of what addiction is. And so for some people, they think, okay, it's that person who's in the alleyway, who's, have that hood over their head and sneaking around every corner. But the reality is that we see addiction across every social, economic, every racial composition. Every person is impacted, even when you think you're not, because we are impacted by our communities that are being decimated by substances, and the services that are needed are not always there. But I think it has a lot to do with people really being fearful of being able to acknowledge that there's an issue that's in their community. And when I say community, I'm talking even in terms of their home, in their household, to be able to say, yes, there is something that's going on. I'm really not sure what it is, but I know it's not healthy. And where do I get that help? And where do I, do I get caught up in the images, or do I reach out and get the help that I really need and need for my family members, without worrying about the stigma of what addiction looks like, other than saying it is a disease, people are affected by it, and how do we really address it so that people can live a healthy and safe life.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, in a world where discrimination clearly exists on every level, drugs and alcohol and addiction do not discriminate. So I agree with you 100%. It doesn't matter, where you live, where you're from, where your background is, level of education, who your parents are. Addiction is real. It's there, and it's something that unfortunately is destroying communities every day and people.
So, a question for you two. Why do you think it's taboo to talk about recovery? Why aren't more people talking and having these conversations?
To Kathy's point, I think a lot of it is just the stigma that's attached with addiction. You brought up, the person in the alleyway, in the dark alleyway with the hood on, and, maybe homeless and doesn't smell great, is not taking care of themselves. That person was once, working a full-time job and raising a family and is doing the best he can, or her, to prosper. And then along came addiction. And through that cycle, without any support, without any help, that same person who was working and, kind of had a stable foundation, after, some months or years, could eventually be that person, that's in the dark alleyway with a hoodie on. And I think part of the negative stigma is that, the behaviors associated with addiction, whether it's breaking the law, lying to people, being unreliable to your friends and family, that behavior, which is directly associated with the addiction, kind of becomes the perception of who that person is. And, doors start to close on you as far as, who's willing to help you.
Absolutely. And I think we can always talk about that we want change, but we have to recognize really that change takes time.
Yeah.
So even when you have someone who is struggling, who has said, hey, I do have a problem, I need help, I'm going after, to get help, but it's not going to happen overnight. That recovery is a lifelong journey. I think that's what our families have to understand. It is a lifelong journey, but it's not an impossible journey.
Yeah, good. And I think also, just understanding that it's something that involves everyone. Like you said, your family has to be involved and committed, with your own recovery. Unfortunately, with addiction, right, the behaviors and the consequences of addiction kind of reinforce more pain. So if it's whether you're drinking and you lose your job or you get a DUI, now you're home all day, and instead of going to work, you kind of start to lose that purpose. Other things happen. Speaking of even nowadays with fentanyl, which is a deadly, deadly toxic drug that, 20 years ago didn't exist on the level it does now. And for someone who's addicted, to opiates, possibly seeing a loved one die from an overdose, it only compounds that pain, and that reinforces or drives the desire to want to use more substances. So, it's going to take everyone. It takes the entire community, professionals, churches, church organizations, your neighbor. I think just being out in the world and generally wanting to be a good person is the start of it. Giving someone help, saying hello, holding the door, really checking in with people when you see that they could be in a bad way, other than, just walking by them and kind of having this image in your mind that this is a bad person. No, this is a person who's struggling,
Absolutely.
and needs help.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, it does take everyone, and that has to be the kind of like the mantra for recovery. I think that it takes everyone. We have this old saying about, it takes a village, but truly it does take a village when you talk about recovery, because you can't do it alone. The average person did not start using alone, and for multiple reasons why they started. But in reality is that they need support, and they need a open hand, and an open door, and recognizing that when we have those things in place, people certainly can recognize that they can have better choices and more options to live healthy.
So my last question to you all would be to think about your experiences in the recovery community. And I think it's important for us to find hope in situations. So can you maybe share a personal story around someone that you have seen on the road to recovery?
Absolutely. During my path, I've been in, addictions counselor for almost 15 years now. And one in particular that I'm thinking about, is a young gentleman that, we was in a residential program, and he was there for about 30 days, and he was struggling with opiates. He had experienced several overdoses, and his parents, were kind of, they had no answers. They didn't know what to do. He had, had several instances where he was in treatment and, would come home and he'd do pretty well. Then a couple months later, he'd relapse and he'd come right back. I recently, got a message from him not too long ago. He's getting married, and he was out on the golf course having a great time. And he thanked me, but, I kind of threw that right back to him because it's his journey, and it's him who's doing the work every single day, heavily involved in the 12-step program. He's now a sponsor and he's helping other people. So, those are the kind of stories that really keep you going, keep your spirits up.
Yeah. And I think this is it's a hard world, just overall. But when you start talking about being in recovery and addiction, the world of trying to manage it once you recognize you have a problem. And so for me, I think about a young woman who was really struggling with addiction, was not interested in treatment, was really forced into treatment because of the fact that her children had been taken away from her, but still not really ready to admit, again, that self-awareness that she had a problem, was forced really into to just going on and taking that leap of faith into treatment. And, after several months of being in residential, working very hard through that program, and then doing some intensive outpatient with a peer support person. She had a sponsor. She had everyone was wrapped around her. Her family had come back into her life to give her support. She was able to get her children back. But it really, again, for me, it really was more about the fact that she was willing to do the work.
Yeah.
People saw that she wanted it, and she was able to get the support, And I think that for her family, they had always been there, but they had been disappointed so many times over and over that they were really, I think, very close to just, throwing up their hands and just saying, enough. But I think that her children was the reason why her family held on to her and really supported her. She's doing very well now. Yeah.
It's a great story.
But again, like we say, it impacts the whole family.
Well, thank you both so much for such an insightful conversation. And it's a reminder that recovery is for the entire family and it's for everyone, for our entire community. And while September is National Recovery Month, we here at Chris 180 want to support you on your recovery journey 24/7, 365 days a year. So in the comments below, we will list several of our programs and resources for you to reach out to. The simplest way to get help, of course, is to go on our website, chris180.org, and that way you can find our resources, our counseling centers, and other programs we have to help you or anyone you may know who is in need of support. Additionally, you can also call the Substance and Mental Health Service Administration's drug-free helpline. That is 1-800-662-HELP, 1-800-662-HELP. We are here for you, and your community is here for you.